Falls.
Is it going?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to interview you. My name is Jordan White. Today is December 18th, and
10.
And it's 10 o'clock a.m. What is your full name?
Orel, O-R-E-L, Friedman, F-R-I-E-D-M-A-N.
Okay, thank you. When and where were you born?
I was born in Glens Falls on September 30th, 1913.
Okay. Before the war, what was your education background like?
Well, I graduated from the Glens Falls High School in 1931. In 1935, I graduated from Union College in Schenectady. In 1939, I graduated from the Albany Medical College. And then I was an intern in Brooklyn at the Bethel Hospital for a year. Then I spent a year at the University of Pennsylvania as a trainee in ear, nose, and throat, which was the specialty that I trained for. And then from 1941 to 42, I was a resident at the Albany Medical Center Hospital in ear, nose, and throat, or otolaryngology, as it's called in scientific language.
Nice. So you liked doing that before the war?
Did I what?
You liked doing that?
Yeah, well, it was all preparation for a career in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I enjoyed going.
Nice.
I've been a perpetual scholar.
I guess so. What made you get into the war? What made you decide to go?
Well, I had completed the basic requirements to be a specialist in ear, nose, and throat, otolaryngology. And they were drafting people of my age. I was single. And I knew that if I didn't volunteer, and they could not protect me in the residency, in other words, the hospital couldn't say, no, he's essential, and we can't let him go. So I could have been drafted, and if I had been drafted, I would have been drafted as a regular GI, and I would have been paid maybe $20 a month, while if I volunteered into the medical corps, I could get a commission as a first lieutenant and start practicing my profession probably right away.
Oh, that's perfect.
So I volunteered in 1942.
Good. Nice. Let's see. What were your dates of service?
From 1942, July 1942 to about May 1946, I was in for 4 years.
Did you have to do any specific training for the medical corps, or since you already had all that background, they just...
No, they put me right to work in my field.
Where's the, can you like tell me where you went and what you did?
Well, my first assignment was to Camp Lee in Virginia. I entered the Army in July 1942, and I went there and I was assigned to the hospital and to the induction center, and I worked in my field there until about March 1944.
What about when you went overseas? Where's the first place that you had to go?
Well, I went to, I was going ultimately to England, but we landed in Scotland and then went to Wales. because the hospital that we were supposed to occupy in England was not ready for us yet. We were part of a group of hospitals that they were preparing for the invasion of Normandy.
Okay.
So we spent some time in Wales doing nothing. And I was fortunate to be part of a small group that was sent to Northern Ireland to man a station hospital there. After Pearl Harbor and the United States entered the war, we took over the defense of Northern Ireland. Not that there were any battles there, but they had to have troops as a possible defensive force, which had been previously taken care of by the British Army. But when the Americans came in, we took that over, and the British Army was relieved of duty there so they could go elsewhere where they were needed more. So there were probably 120,000 American troops at one time in Northern Ireland.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
No, not a very well-known fact.
Yeah. I know that you brought up Pearl Harbor, and one of the questions that are like a big conversation starter our teacher told us was where you were and when you found out about Pearl Harbor. Can you tell me about that experience?
Yeah, I can remember it very well. I was arrested in the Albany Medical Center Hospital. It was a Sunday morning, and I had been called to the emergency room to take care of a patient who had come in there. When the word spread that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and that was December 7th, 1941.
Do you how did you feel when you heard about it at first?
I had a feeling that it was going to affect me personally and change my life.
Oh, and it did?
It did.
When you were overseas, how did you keep in touch with your family at home?
By letters.
Mm-hmm. Did you get to talk to them a lot through letters, or not so much?
Yeah, we corresponded pretty regularly.
Oh, good. What family was still in the United States? What of your family did you talk to? Like, you know what I'm saying?
My parents.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wrote to my parents, mainly my parents.
You mentioned to me on the phone that your brother also served as a military police.
Yeah.
Do you have anything about him that you'd like to share? Or
Yeah. Well, when I was in England, he was sent to England with the military police.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, security was such that you just couldn't tell him where you were.
Yeah.
But he was there and he wanted to find me. So he contacted the Red Cross, and in no time flat, they told him where I was, and he was able to contact me and actually visit me.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, so we had a nice visit together.
That's nice. Is your brother still with us?
No.
No. Sorry, I don't really know. When you were in Europe, did you know about like concentration camps and things like that, or didn't you really know what was going on?
We had heard something about it, yeah. I had heard something about it.
Can you tell me one of your most memorable experiences of being in the medical corps?
Wait, what's the question?
One of your most memorable experiences?
In the war?
Mm-hmm.
During the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I told you on the phone meeting my wife.
You want to tell me that story? How you met your wife?
Well, yeah. I was in Camp Lee, Virginia. And that was December 1943.
Mm-hmm.
She had worked and then went back to college and was on a college vacation in December. My wife-to-be lived in Pennsylvania, but she came down during her Christmas vacation to Richmond, Virginia, which was about roughly 23 miles from Camp Lee, which was in Virginia. And she was visiting her cousin there. And her cousin had a boyfriend who used to visit her just about every weekend, and he was a dentist in our hospital. And I knew him not too well, but I knew he had a girlfriend there. And I was taking care of some patients who were very interesting patients, but I really wanted to know more about their illnesses, and we didn't have a very good library. So I wanted to go into Richmond to the medical school there and use their library. But during the war, we were all restricted with using gasoline. We had to have gasoline tickets just like people who weren't in the Army. And I had run out of gasoline tickets, so there was no way I could go in my car. So I asked this dentist who was in our group if possibly I could get a ride into Richmond with him, because I knew he went there just about every weekend to visit his girlfriend. And I wanted to go on a Saturday. So he said yes, and he was delighted. He said, "I have a date for you." Apparently his girlfriend knew that her cousin was coming, and she told him to find a date for us. And he hadn't done anything about it. So it was like just perfect. He was, and I wasn't too excited about it, but I figured if no date, no ride. So I said, okay. And that's how we met. And it just turned out that it was something, I guess it was ordained for the two of us to meet.
That's nice. That's a cute. So you wrote to her when you were in Europe the whole time? Yeah,
well, that was December, and I went overseas in March. That was December 1943. In 1944, I went over. In March 1944, I went overseas. So we had a few dates, and I actually visited her at home in Pennsylvania one weekend, and that was it. And then I wooed her by mail. But I'm a pretty good writer, and I used to write a little poetry and things, so I probably made a better impression by writing than being there personally. So, anyhow, when I came back, but that's a much longer story, and we did get married when I came back from overseas. But there's a lot more to the story, but it could go on for a long
time. Okay. Being that you kind of like grew up in like the Great Depression era, can you tell me a little bit about growing up then?
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate in that my family, we had moved from Guns Falls to Scroon Lake. And during the Depression, and my parents had a business there, ready-to-wear clothes and sportswear and things. And the Great Depression itself was a terrible, terrible time for many, many people. Much worse than we have today, and it's bad enough today. We learned lots of lessons from the Great Depression, and my generation, I think, learned valuable lessons that have helped us in conducting our lives and how we handled our finances and everything else. But anyhow, I worked in my parents' store from the day school let out till the time I went back to school. And we were fortunate that they were able to send me through college and medical school during the Depression years.
Right.
But the Depression itself was real and it was severe.
How did other people's lives change? Like your life obviously was affected, but people that were like worse off than you, was it really like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like I'm trying to ask like about like people that weren't as fortunate as you. Did you see that?
Yeah, there were people, they had bread lines, people who had been very comfortable lost everything, especially if they had invested in the stock market, because the stock market crash started the Depression. My parents didn't invest in the stock market, so they didn't suffer that way. And then it just keeps adding on as one thing fails and something else fails and people lose jobs. And it was a very severe time. Fortunately, President Roosevelt did try and make changes and do things to alleviate the suffering as much as he could. And it helped some, but still, we never really came out of the Depression until World War II started. And then after that, we did come out of the Depression, but it wasn't the best way to end the Depression.
Yeah, but definitely that helped get the economy rolling again.
Yeah.
So it's
Definitely.
it's great.
Because when we went into the war in 1941, still had not the country had not completely recovered from the Depression.
I know I'm jumping all over. I didn't really. I need to be more on track. But back when you were overseas, did you ever I know that you're in the medical corps, but did you ever see combat or anything like that? Like I've read a couple of things where people, even doctors and stuff, had to fight, only in specific cases they had to fight, but you never had to experience that?
No, I was never in combat. The only thing I did see was our hospital was in a city called Great Malvern, or a town, and it was in the Midlands, a fair distance from London. But they used to send me to London every couple of months for a conference, so I went in there, and I could see where there was housing and apartments, and then the next time I came, they were gone. I actually could see what was happening. Also, I did venture down into the subway, and I saw the people, during the war in England, they slept in the subway. That was the safest place to prevent being hit by bombs, so they slept in the subways, and I went down there just to see what it was like, and there were all the people laid out and sleeping in the subways. But I never was actually in combat.
Even though you weren't in combat, it must have been very hard to see all the wounded and all of the casualties that were happening. I'm sure that wasn't affecting you.
Well, war is hell. There's no question about it. Our hospital received casualties from the invasion of Normandy, starting probably within a week or less than when the injury occurred. They'd gone through all the field hospitals and what other hospitals they had there, first aid and field hospitals and everything. And then they came to us for definitive treatment. Either we could make them well enough to go back to duty, or we sent them back to the United States. And I saw many young men who had been in excellent physical condition. They came back blind, deaf, all kinds of terrible injuries, permanent injuries that they would never recover from. So it's hell. It definitely is.
Did you see a lot of self-inflicted wounds while you were there? Because I know that like the mental anguish of war for the people that were fighting was like difficult. Or didn't you see that as much?
I really didn't see anything. That didn't seem to be a big factor. At least we didn't recognize anything as such.
Right.
What brings that up? Because
I don't know. I guess a lot of things that I've read before have said like the like just like psychologically,
well, that's
it would be
something
like draining. So like they just wanted to leave and they felt very like like giving up kind of thing.
I didn't see much of that, or we didn't recognize it.
Right.
I mean, there was post-traumatic stress syndrome, which we didn't call it that at that time.
Mm.
But psychologically, war has a terrible effect on the soldiers. And they called it shell shock in World War I and gassed and all that sort of thing. But now they recognize it as a post-traumatic stress syndrome, which is a very real thing, and which the soldiers suffering from battle and repeated tours of duty in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, they're really suffering.
Mm.
But as a factor, that was not important. At least we didn't recognize it.
No, yeah. I'm just curious to see whether you saw that or not.
Yeah.
I know that like during World War II, a lot of like new medical technologies had come out. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, they saved many lives that they would not have been able to save in previous wars. For one reason, they treated the initial injuries in shock much better. They had better facilities and blood and plasma and things than in previous wars.
Mm-hmm.
We also had the benefit of sulfa drugs, and even though penicillin had been discovered in 1939, it was late in the war before we began to use penicillin, but these things worked like magic, so they made a big difference. And there were much better techniques. As each war, they learned new things and improved techniques. They're much better the way they treat the casualties, say, and treat them in Iraq than we did in World War II. There have been a lot of advances since then.
Yeah, sure.
And they've saved many soldiers who would have died in World War II. Now they have quadruple amputations and they've been able to keep them alive, which they would not have been able to do in World War II. So each war they learn more.
I just had a question, I lost it. Did your supplies ever run out? Did you ever feel like you didn't have like enough supplies to treat your patients? Or did you feel like you were well covered?
I think we were pretty well supplied.
How was the food when you were there?
Food in general was good. Of course, we had things like powdered eggs, you know, but no, in general, we were well fed. As I said, I was never in the front lines.
Right. How do you feel about your experience in the medical corps? Do you feel like it was like a good experience for you and you're happy that you did it?
I would say that it was a good experience, and I'll tell you why. First, my entry into the Army came along at just about the optimum time in my life. I had not set up a practice, I was not married. I really had no obligations except to my parents who had supported me through school and everything. And they were still supporting me until the time I went in the Army. But although it changed my plans, it didn't cause a big disruption in my life like it would have if I had been an established doctor and had to leave that with a family at home and all that. So from that standpoint, it came along at the best time. Secondly, I did practice my specialty most of the time in the Army. Of course, the field was not the same type of practice you would have, children, things like that. But I did work in my field at the time. And third, I was safe. And also, I met my wife. So I would say it was a pretty positive experience for me, considering everything.
When you tried to get into it, did you have any trouble because of, on the phone you mentioned that you have a hearing problem and that your father also had?
Yeah.
Did they?
They put me on what was called limited service. I functioned well enough, but I didn't have perfect hearing. But I functioned well at that time. And other than that, I think when they put you on limited service, that meant you probably weren't supposed to go into combat or overseas or things like that. But they did. They sent me overseas because I was in a non-combat field.
Right. What is your hearing loss called? What is your?
It's called sensory neural hearing loss.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. The nerve endings in the inner ear, an external ear, which you can see here. Then there's a middle ear, which is inside of the eardrum. And then there's the inner ear. You're familiar with the anatomy of the ear?
No.
And then there's the inner ear where there are little hair cells, which are the nerve endings that pick up sound. And through these nerve cells, the sound is transmitted by way of the auditory nerve to the brain.
Okay.
Well, I've lost a lot of the hair cells in my inner ear. I still have some which function when the sound is loud enough to reach them, which a hearing aid does. It amplifies the sound that it is able to stimulate.
So this is a hereditary?
It's hereditary in mine. It can also occur from being in the war, for instance. In my work, I saw, as I said, many soldiers coming back from the front who were deaf. And I actually did a rather basic study, which I wrote up in a scientific article, which was published in a prestigious journal. And
wow. So this is all about
that's about my experiences, my experience over in England and what I saw there.
Wow.
And I wrote it up.
Wow, that's cool. It got published and everything?
Yeah, it was published in a very prestigious journal, and I got an advanced degree. This worked towards an advanced degree at the University of Pennsylvania.
Wow. Very cool. So during the war, did you mostly work on ears and throat, or were you for everything?
Well, in the head and neck. In the
Mhm.
head and neck.
But you could do everything, or it was mostly head and neck?
No, I didn't do everything.
Oh, just that, okay.
Well, on a rare occasion, I was assigned as like a family physician or a general practitioner to work.
Mhm.
But most of the time, it was mostly in the head and neck.
Did you ever, were there ever civilians and that you helped them, or it was only,
No, I really had no contact with
Right.
civilians.
Okay. Once you got home from the war, what's the first thing that you did?
Well, I went and visited my parents, and then I arranged for my fiancée, she wasn't a fiancée then, to meet my family, and then we got together and so on.
Did you have any kids with your wife?
We had 3 children,
How old are they now?
62, 60, and 58.
Wow. So after the war, throughout your life, you were still a doctor, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. How did your military experience influence your life? Besides, I guess I kind of asked that earlier, and that you said that it was positive experience.
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned most of the things.
Right. Let's see.
I did travel and see different places, a lot of the United States and, of course, in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
just in the United Kingdom, in England, Wales. I visited Scotland, but I think traveling was beneficial. When travel is broadening and so on.
Have you ever gone back since then?
Yeah.
Have you? Did you visit the specific sites that you had been at, or you just went over there for?
Not really. I visited some of the same countries or areas.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really go back because I had been there before.
Right. Let's see. What do you find it hard to watch documentaries on the war now? Because you don't think that they're...
No, I saw Saving Private Ryan. I thought that was probably very accurate. I don't watch a lot of war, the TV where there are war stories. No, I don't watch a lot of that. It doesn't bother me.
You don't find anything you haven't seen anything that has been crazy out of the ordinary that you didn't really think was a correct portrayal?
Well, as I said, I had no experience in combat, so
Mm-hmm.
I was really not a judge.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any fond memories of the war? Maybe you've met some friends over there, or some funny experiences?
Yeah, I made friends, some of whom I kept in contact with after the war,
Mm-hmm.
and my wife's cousin, who lived in Richmond and married, we used to, whenever we went to Florida, we'd always drive through and stay in Richmond with her
Mm-hmm.
for an evening, for a night. And there were some people that I kept in touch with. I haven't been active in veterans organizations or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I said, I came out in good physical conditions.
Right. Do you have any like a funny story that might be, I don't know, anything like in the back of your mind that you have like a funny recollection of during your time, like a kind of like a heart?
Well, yeah, there are always good sides and bad sides to things. I remember when I was in Northern Ireland, and we were stationed in this area, the station hospital in Kilray, the town was. And the birds there the bird droppings were horrible. And I remember I wrote a poem, it was called The Order of the White Spot, because we were all getting hit with bird droppings.
Oh,
And I wrote the way I handled it was to write a poem about the Order of the White Spot. That was when you got hit, you became a member of the order. There's always humor. There's always humor.
Mm-hmm.
When people are together, right now I can't recollect them.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just wondering if there's anything specific. You said that you used to write poetry. Was that a way to like express how you were feeling, or you just like doing that? Did you just
I think I expressed my feelings. I continued to write.
Did you? Did you keep it until now, or did you? Do you still have some of it?
Yeah, I have some of my poetry.
Good. What else do you have in your? Do you have anything in there?
No, just
No?
I made some notes about my experiences.
Anything specific that you want to share?
Not particularly, except that
Okay.
I want to repeat that war is hell, and I would love to see a world where there was peace forever.
Mm.
That's my dream.
That's a good dream. I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah. And that's what I think we should all work for, but whether it'll come about in I don't think it'll come about in my lifetime, maybe in yours.
I hope so. Well, thank you very much. I don't really... Is there anything that you can think of, Brittany? No?
I think you covered everything.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Any other questions you want to ask me?
I can't think of any, but is there anything that you would like to share?
Well, I think Matt Rosell has done a wonderful, his project I think is wonderful. I followed it and all the things that he's done. You're most fortunate in being part of that program, because I don't, too many high school students